Hi, and welcome to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm Dupe Witherick, alcohol free wellbeing and transformational coach, and the best selling author of A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol Free. This podcast will show you that being alcohol free is not what the traditional narrative says. And even though alcohol is so ingrained in our society that it is okay to give yourself permission to stop drinking if you want to. And you do not have to wait until you hit rock bottom. It is certainly not boring, and I believe ditching drinking is just the start to living an extraordinary life. By getting rid of this one thing, it allows the doors to open to endless possibilities and opportunities. Each week, we will have guests on who are at various stages of the alcohol-free journey, from those who are curious to those who have been alcohol-free for years. We will also have experts on talking about different topics relating to alcohol and beyond. Through these conversations, you will discover what it means to thrive alcohol-free. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm so pleased you are here, and I hope you've had the most wonderful week. We are coming up to Valentine's tomorrow, so I wonder if you are celebrating Valentine's, if you are believe in Valentine's Day, or if you don't. I always think Valentine's is something that when you need to show love on a specific day, I'm not sure I really buy into it. I think you need to show love every day, and you also need to show yourself love as well. Self-love is so important. So whatever you're doing this Valentine's Day, just remember to also do something for you, because it's all about loving yourself as well. And I do have, if you are curious about your relationship and you want to know a little bit more about it, I encourage you to download the human design report that's on my website, which is 3 ways to improve your relationship through human design. So if that's something you're interested in, head to thrivealcoholfree.com/human design, and you can get your free chart, and then you have the option to purchase that report. There's also a report on health, and there's also a detailed personalized human design report if you're interested in that. And then, of course, if you want to dig deeper, I have my human design one-to-one sessions, which are 90 minutes, which go into you and how best to use your energy, how to make aligned decisions, what your strengths are. We go into each of the centers, and we also talk about the character you're meant to play in the world, plus a bit on your purpose. So if that's of interest, feel free to book a one-to-one session. I'd love to delve into that with you. I wanted to quickly talk about the retreat as well, the Finding Freedom retreat, which is coming up in June this year, and I'm incredibly excited about it. I just wanted to share something that I posted a few days ago, and this is just a little thought of mine. Invitations and opportunities keep coming up, which you know you want to say yes to, but instead you stop yourself and say maybe later. We only have one precious life, and it's short. Your desires are there to guide you. The things you are wanting want you, and are likely the stepping stones to your dreamiest life. So stop waiting for the right time or the perfect circumstances to say yes. You can give yourself permission now. It's all there for you. So what will you do with this one precious life? And I really wanted to talk about this on the podcast. What is it in your life right now that you want to say yes to, and what's holding you back? You're absolutely allowed to give yourself permission. So if you'd like to go on a life-changing adventure in Bali this June with like-minded women and expand your capacity for success, growth, and well-being in a nourishing and magical environment, then the Finding Freedom retreat is for you. There are only a few weeks left to secure the payment plan for the retreat, and that means you can break up the investments, which is a great thing if you are thinking about the investment and spreading that out. But I really want to encourage you that you are allowed to give yourself permission. You are allowed to say yes to yourself. And with the whole self-love peace. This retreat will really help you better understand yourself, let go of maybe some fears that you might be holding on to, some limiting beliefs. We'll do a couple of healing ceremonies. There'll be sound baths and breath work and yoga and EFT. We'll also talk a bit about human design. So by the end of it, as well as the amazing excursions like visiting the cave waterfall and going on a swing across the rice terraces and doing some Balinese cooking as well. There's a whole range of things that we're going to do over the 8 days. And there is an itinerary that I would be happy to share with you. So if you are interested in this and you are wanting to say yes, this is your invitation. This is one of the invitations that keeps coming. And I want you to say yes to yourself. I don't want you to say maybe later. Why not say yes today? So if you're interested, feel free to DM me at Thrive Alcohol Free and I'll send you the itinerary, or you can email dw@thrivealcoholfree.com. And I'd love to hear from you. I'd love you to be one of the ladies at this retreat and just come back feeling like life is different and you are ready to create and live your dreamiest life. So if this is something that resonates, something you are curious about, if you'd like to jump on a call, I'm happy to as well. And why not secure one of the last spots? Today's guest is Dr. David Hamilton, and I'm so pleased he's on the podcast. We had a really great conversation, and if you don't know Dr. David Hamilton, he is amazing, and he is a former R&D scientist, but he's now the author of 12 books, including his latest book, The Joy of Actually Giving an FUCK. So without further ado, here is the conversation with David Hamilton. So welcome, Dr. David Hamilton. I'm so pleased that you're here on the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, actually. Thanks for having me on. It's a real pleasure.
Brilliant, brilliant. So I'm sure a lot of my listeners probably will know who you are, but just in case, why don't you give a brief introduction and we can go from there?
I suppose if I go back a wee bit, I used to work in research and development, so cardiovascular medicine and cancer. I became intrigued by understanding the placebo effect because I saw it time and time again within the roles that I had, and I had this passionate thirst to understand how it is exactly how what's going on in the brain and body when someone improves on a placebo. And the reason why I had that interest, I suppose, is because my mum had postpartum depression when I was a kid after my youngest sister was born, and mental practices really helped my mum. So my mum and I talked about it all through my teenage years growing up. So when I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, in the cardiovascular field particularly, the placebo effect was just a fascination to me. So I started researching it and eventually I left the industry because although I loved doing the research and development and mucking about with the structure of molecules and stuff, because that's what I did my PhD and I loved it, my greater interest lay in education and communication and helping people in some way to improve the quality of their lives through harnessing mind and emotions. So that's really how I became a writer. I just decided one day I'm going to leave the industry. I have to say I hadn't thought it all the way through. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. It didn't work out all that well for the first 3 or 4 years, but eventually it started to get there.
It's funny when you say it didn't work out quite well for the first 3 or 4 years. It probably was working out well, but you probably didn't appreciate what you were learning along the way
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
love.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, but I went completely broke. I was literally completely broke. The thing is, I left to write books and be a speaker, a teacher, like a public speaker kind of thing. But I had no confidence. The idea of speaking in front of people prior to that had frightened the life out of me. And I thought, what am I doing? Leaving a well-paid career to become a writer and a speaker when the idea of doing it frightens the life out of me. And sometimes we make these odd decisions that sort of feel like the right thing to do, but logically they don't really make all that much sense because I'd failed my English at school as well. And so the dominant past experiences of mine is what ran the show for the first 3 or 4 years, which is why I ended up completely broke and no one came to my speaking events because I had no confidence to promote myself. at all.
Mm.
So it took a wee while before I got going, and then I co-founded a charity with some friends, ran that for a couple of years, and then took a job as a college lecturer in chemistry, back to my roots. And that period of about 3 years was my growing up period, where I gained more confidence and had the time, the space to sit back a wee bit and figure things out. And then I started writing my first book, like 4 or 5 years after I left the job.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because we all go on these journeys. We have this calling to a purpose or to doing something, and we think it's going to happen overnight. And
Yeah,
it never, it really does. It really does. And we need that growth period, that sort of learning period, probably gaining some of the tools that you teach and talk about in order for us to fully step into who we're meant to be and feel empowered to actually go for that. And so
yeah,
I think it's really good of you to talk about that, because a lot of people either think whatever they're thinking, even though it sounds like a fantastic idea, they're either put off because they're like, I can't do that, and then they never go after their dream, or it gets a bit hard and then they give up just before it's probably going to start. So,
yeah.
it's
That
interesting hearing people's stories and hopefully
yeah.
motivating for people.
Hopefully, Reed Tracy, who's the CEO of Hay House Publishing Company, Reed Tracy once told me that it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. In other words, people see you landing on the stage at something, or appearing on the scene. I've never seen this person before. Wow, written all these books, and what they don't see get is the backstory and the challenges that you had to overcome, and the work it took to actually get
Mm,
to be the person that they see on that people see on the screen. And that for me
mm,
is always very significant. But that helps me as well, because I don't immediately expect, if I try something new, for it to land right away. I don't give it that much thought, because whether it does or not is beside the
mm.
point. It's more about just doing what I believe in, and it takes a bit of the pressure off, when
Yeah.
you don't need it to work overnight.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I just wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier about your mum actually having those mental practices that helped her with postpartum depression. And is that really where a lot of your books and your ideas have come from in terms of the tool, or what would you suggest? What were some of the things that she was doing?
Yeah, bizarrely, I found a book in the library, the school library. I was 11 years old. I just started high school, and the teacher had taken us to the library. And I think it
Mm,
might have been my first time in a library, if I'd been in one before, other than the mobile library who used to drive up my
mm,
street once a month or so. I don't recall. But whether I bumped the shelf or not, I don't know. But a book landed flat down, and it said The Magic Power of Your Mind. And I knew my mum was struggling at the time. She didn't
wow.
really tell the
Mm,
kids, us, myself, my three sisters, and I, what was happening, but you could
mm,
tell. And I thought, I bet that book can help my mum. So I
mm,
just took it. I didn't know you're supposed to join a library. I just literally took it and still got it. But it really helped my mum. It taught her things like visualization, and it taught her meditation. And it also introduced the whole concept of the broader power of the mind to impact our lives and stuff. And so my mum was fascinated by it, and it really, really helped. Didn't cure depression in one day, but it gave her these practices that helped her
mm,
to navigate a course through some of the difficult times. And so my mum and I, all through my teenage years, talked about the power of the mind and all the different areas of it. And that kind of formed a basis, not only for my interest when I worked in the pharmaceutical industry and the placebo effect, but also a basis of what my first books would actually be written about. The power of the mind. My first book was It's the Thought That
mm,
Counts, which is all about the power of the
mm,
mind to shape our
mm.
lives and also to impact our bodies. And then I wrote a book where I called Destiny versus Free Will, which I don't think is in print anymore. But that was about the balance between destiny and free will. But then I went right back to the mind body connection again, visualization and mind body connection. How does visualization work to
Mm,
impact and sometimes heal our bodies?
mm,
And so it was that catalyzed, I guess,
mm.
the direction that the early part of my writing career moved in.
Yeah, yeah, and the power of visualization. I was going to ask then. So when you hit that moment where you'd left your job, you'd been trying this for a couple of years, and then we're getting to the point where like this isn't working. What did you personally do to lift yourself out of it?
I remember I went through, if I'm being really honest, I went through a period of depression where I felt lost.
Mm,
So we got to the end of
mm,
a charity I'd set up a charity called Spirit Aid Foundation, and it was really about harnessing the power of the human spirit, really, and kindness to help children whose lives had been affected by war and
mm,
poverty. And some friends and I ran it. We came to the end of a large project, and I left after that because I was broke. I had no money. All the money was going into the charity, and I didn't have an income and stuff. And I went through for the next 3 or 4 months a bit of depression where I just lost my way. And I remember even thinking, I don't have what it takes to be a writer and a speaker. I'm going to apply for jobs and just go back to work again. And so I applied for loads of jobs.
mm,
Interestingly, I only got one response. I remember applying for 30 jobs. I got one response. And that just
mm,
confirmed what I was feeling at the time. Because what I was really feeling at the time was, I feel worthless, that nobody would notice if I wasn't here. And I know that wasn't the case, but when you're feeling that way, that's how you feel. And getting that confirmation of 29 out of 30 no replies was consistent with what I believed. No one would notice. What's the point of me? What began to change it was when I plunged head and heart and soul into writing my first book. When I thought, okay, we're now at maybe 3.5 years since I left the pharmaceutical industry, and I've not written a word. So I remember it was the end
mm,
of January. I formally sat down and started writing, and never stopped really. And I used to write at the time that felt sweetest to me at the time, and that was when I came in. And I used to start open up my laptop sometimes late at night, at 12 o'clock at night, and write till three in the morning. And other times, I would
mm,
sit in a coffee shop for a couple of hours. But I
mm,
started writing my first book then, and that was the antidote to how I was feeling at the time. And looking back, I would say it's because I was doing something that was not only meaningful for me, but it was also a reminder
mm,
of this is why I set out in the path I'm on. I'd sort of got sidetracked for a while, and what I'd really left to do was write and speak. And so here I was doing something that immediately
mm,
resonated with me. Oh my God, this feels so right. And so that's what I did. And because I was completely broke for a while, I took little odd jobs here and there. And then a year later, I got a job, well, not quite a year later, as a part time chemistry lecturer and chemistry tutor at a local university. And I used that money to help me to self-publish the book because every publisher I sent it to said no. So I used the money that I got from lecturing
mm,
to pay for the
mm,
self-publication. But what certainly was the antidote to how I was feeling at the time was that sense of purpose of doing something I absolutely loved doing, even though I had no idea how to write a book. Literally not a clue how to write a book. I mean, not even the tiniest bit of a clue, absolutely zero clue. But it's funny when you put your mind to something that you really want to be able to do. And I think this applies to all of life. If you put your
mm,
mind to something you really want to be
mm,
able to do, you find a way. And it might not be the same way someone else does it. It's your way. But if you really put
mm.
your mind to it, I
Yeah.
think we always manage to find a way. And then that way becomes uniquely ours, and we'll remember
Mm,
it for the rest of our lives. That's why I still look back at my first book as my favourite writing experience because it was the first time I'd done
mm,
it. And it was a beautiful 2 years, actually, it took me.
mm. Yeah, and I think that's such a helpful reminder that our minds are so amazing. We can do anything we want to do, but generally it's fear or it's us thinking we can't do it or not believing in ourselves or whatever it is
Yeah,
that stops us from even trying. And as you said, you put it on hold for a few years, whereas you could have maybe started writing straight away. You wouldn't have got lost as you described, but who knows? I always think that everything's happening for us.
yeah,
So I'm sure that journey was purposeful in some way and it got you to where you were. And even when you said I had one reply out of the 30 jobs I applied for, I immediately thought, well, that was something big outside yourself saying, actually, you need to keep writing, you need to stay on your path. You're not
yeah,
really meant to go and get a job. But at the time, obviously, you saw it in a very different light.
yeah,
And so, again, it's how we perceive things and how our minds lead us, isn't it?
yeah, 100%. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. You've gone on to write 12 books and you claim that you obviously didn't pass English and your first book wasn't signed by anyone. So maybe talk through that story. How did you go from there to where you are today?
Do you know, it seems like a lot of books, and it's because I've so enjoyed the process of having an idea for something and researching it and being a scientist by background. That's my natural way to do things. Is here's a subject, let's go into the
Mm,
medical journals and the psychology journals and the sociology journals and even sometimes the physics journals and learn and understand and build and pull extract the information out of these out of these journals that's written in gobbledygook, really, for the
mm,
average person, and translate it into a way that most people, and I used to use my mum and my dad and my Auntie Jean as my barometer. Can I take this complex subject, package it in a simple way that retains the actual full scientific truth and essence, but written in a way that my mum and my dad and my Auntie Jean, none of whom went to higher education, can totally read and understand. And that was my barometer from my first book to what I do now. So I've always
mm,
aspired to be able to take complex ideas, retain the truth of them, but communicate them in a really, really simple way that's relatable and understandable for people. And I so enjoyed the thrill of taking complex stuff. And I think that's partly why I've written so many books. It's that excitement of taking something that people don't know much about and learning it, richly understanding it, and communicating it in a different way. And I've wondered over the years in and out of different subject areas that were relevant to me at the time. So I started off mind body connection, but then I found some research
mm,
I started exploring more spirituality. So as I was falling into spirituality a bit more, then
mm,
my second book focused on kind of spirituality and forces of destiny and the interplay between destiny and free will. And then I flicked back again and I brought the spirituality, but used that expanded self of mine to go back into the mind body connection. And then I found some research on kindness. And it was a
mm,
meditation style that measured the cardiovascular impact in the same way that I was familiar with, because we also measured the cardiovascular impact of some drugs, antihypertensive drugs and cholesterol lowering drugs that I had worked on. So I recognized the technique and it was showing the impact of a meditation, a kindness meditation, compassion meditation. So I wrote a whole book on all the different ways that kindness is good for you, called Why Kindness is Good for You. And then what happened again, as I'd gone right into the science, I fell back into the spirituality again. And I wrote my next couple of books, really dived deeper into the whole destiny, free will, spirituality, consciousness stuff. And then I found myself going back over again to much more hard science, and it was a couple of books on kindness. And then I flipped all the way back over again,
mm,
and I'm fully exploring a book called Why Woo Woo Works. So
mm,
deep dive into consciousness, creating reality, crystals, meditation, all that kind of stuff, and balancing it this time, right? Complete balance, the science and the spirituality. And then from there, I felt much more expanded, and I felt it's time to do another book on kindness. This time written in a different way, in a
mm,
much more powerful way, because I've become more as a person, as a consciousness, I
yeah.
suppose, as I've gone through my journey, that I thought I could take that subject again that I've already written 3 books on, but make it a much richer book, much deeper, much more powerful explanation of some of the content. So that's been kind of my journey, is science, spirituality, science, spirituality. I get so much of that, I'm missing some of that. And I get so much of that, I'm missing some of that. And I flick between them until I sort of found a perfect balance in my book, Why Woo Woo Works, where I think I really balanced the science and spirituality and spoke both languages, but communicated to all sides, kind of thing, before, as I say, my new book on
Mm,
kindness.
mm,
It's been a fascinating journey. I've
mm.
loved every minute of
It,
it.
yeah, and it sounds like you've lived it as well. And I think it's such a gift when you one live something, but two, where you can take those complex subjects and make it really down to earth so that people can understand. Because actually, what you're then doing is sharing knowledge that people may not have access to. As you say, journals are quite heavy, and not many people want to sit and go through all those journals. So that's a real gift that you have, I think, in terms of helping people to really understand things in a way that's, yeah.
Yeah, thank. Right in the middle of all those books, I actually wrote a
Yeah.
book on self-esteem, which was completely different from all my other books, called I Heart Me.
Right.
And the reason I wrote that book was for me, because
Mm,
I'd got to a point in my journey where I was
yeah.
starting to feel kind of fracturing and broken, and I was losing my way a little bit. And I realized that I had a lot of outward self-esteem, and so there's two types of self-esteem or self-love. There's the external, where you build your
Mm,
sense of worthiness and value upon positive achievements in life and people having a positive opinion of you. But then you have internal self esteem, which is actually what self love is,
mm,
which is an inner sense of worthiness and value, which is not dependent upon external circumstances. I realized, given what was happening in my life in a multitude of different ways, that I had a lot of the external, but almost none of the internal. My life was breaking apart in a number of ways. And so I spent 2 years writing a book on self love because I needed it myself. And the book, it really captures everything that I learned. And I would say I grew more as a person in 2 years working on that book than in the previous decade of working on personal development. That's how much self love work actually transformed my life. And only then was I able to start writing even better books.
wow, that's amazing. And I talk about self-love a lot because I think, especially with the clients that I work with, when you take alcohol out of your life, you do then think about, you have this space and time, and obviously emotions are raw and you're not having anything to really numb those out. And so one of the things I say to my clients is, do you love yourself? And or they won't even know what that is. What do you like to do? Again, not really sure, because they've gone through the motions of doing something. And self-love is such a key part. Self-care, self-love is such a key part of the work that I do as well. So what would you say as you were going on that 2 year journey, that you obviously said you grew more in those 2 years than the 10? What may be the three things that stood out in those 2 years
Yeah,
with regard to self-love?
thank you. That is a really great question. The first thing that for me was an absolute game changer, and this is what my science background really helped here. I learned that there's a two-way interaction between how you feel on the outside and how that feeling is expressed on your muscles. We normally think of it as your facial muscles. It's why you smile when you feel happy. It's like an automatic, reflex, so to speak. It's why you frown when you're sad. But it's not just these muscles,
Mm,
your shoulders and your neck. And if you're feeling self-confident, then you'll wear it on your body. But if you're struggling with self-esteem, with self-love, you'll also wear that on your body. Not every moment of the day, but particularly in situations and around certain types of
mm,
people where you feel a little less,
mm,
and you'll wear it on your body. And when I realized that, what was a real
mm,
game changer was realizing that's a two-way street. Because not only is it true that how you feel on the inside is projected on the outside, but what you purposefully do on purpose with your body on the outside,
mm,
with your muscles, feeds back inwards and impacts how you feel. And in the short term, you can change how you feel very, very
mm,
quickly by just making a sudden and abrupt change to the way that you're holding and moving your body and to the way you're breathing. Just sudden and abrupt change. And within, you know, 10, 20, 30 seconds, it can be a significant change. But the real impact to this, in terms of building self love, was making that a relentless daily practice. And for me, this was a game changer. I probably
mm.
adjusted my posture, the way I was
Yeah.
sitting or standing or walking, 10 times a day. Some days I even had a reminder on my phone, like every hour or every couple of hours, ping, a wee reminder to remind me that came up on my screen that said, how are you standing or how are you sitting, what's your posture? Just little reminders. I tried to vary the language just to remind myself to correct my posture. And every day I would stand for 2 minutes
Mm,
in what they call a power pose. And when you do that relentlessly, what you're actually doing is you're training your major postural muscles that are linked to feeling, to emotion. So if you're training these muscles, you're training the brain networks,
mm,
not just associated with the muscles, but these muscles are linked with emotional states. So what you're also training is emotional states. And for me, in the space of a couple of months, that was a life changer. That was a life-changing technique, was literally
Mm.
relentless harnessing of the power of my posture. And it made a huge difference to how I was feeling in the outside and
Mm.
how I conducted myself genuinely on the outside. The next major thing I learned was about the
Mm.
importance that it's okay to feel vulnerable and let people see it. Hiding behind our vulnerabilities because we're afraid of what people might think or say, at the end of the day, doesn't do us any good. And I found through, a challenging personal experience when I lost my dog, who was only 2 years old and he had bone cancer. He was my best friend, and
Mm.
allowing people to see my pain, and not even when I was on stage, because the book came out around about the same time, and even people seeing me break down on stage crying when I talked about him, and not trying to pretend that I'm a super confident, positive writer and speaker. I can handle all this, but I couldn't handle it, and allowing that
Mm.
to come out of me and being really vulnerable. It's funny because I was speaking at a Hay
Mm.
House conference, and I thought in the moment, that's the end of my career. People are looking at all these other confident speakers on stage, and they want to buy their books because I want to be confident like that person. And I thought in the moment that I started crying, I thought, well, that's the end of that book. No one's going to buy that book, because why do you want to buy a book from someone who is a mess on stage? And literally, my book sold out in 5 minutes. In fact, Hay House were sending people out into London, and they bought up all the stock in all the Waterstones, because people actually
Mm.
saw a human
Wow.
being on the stage and not someone pretending that everything was okay. And saying, well, if he can manage to do things
Yeah.
while feeling that way, then that's being human. And that was a huge lesson for me, is not to be
Mm.
afraid of being vulnerable, because it actually lets
Mm.
people see your humanness. And at the same time, people feel themselves that it's okay for me to express my humanness. And so that was a huge kind of thing for me. And
Mm.
I think rather than three, that's probably the two main game changers for me
Mm.
during that. There was several more, but I think those are the ones that were significant for me during that time, was the posture stuff, and it's okay to feel vulnerable.
Mm. And I think they're both really powerful. I think when it comes to vulnerability, I love the phrase, your mess becomes your message. And
Yeah.
that really resonates with me. I think we do seem to be drawn towards people who are open and are sharing and have something that was maybe messy at the time that is now something that they're really passionate about and
Aye.
talking about in a vulnerable way, as you say. And it's funny, isn't it, how our minds and how we've been trained say, well, if you cry in front of people, that makes you look weak as
Mm,
opposed to strong, and that's going
yeah.
to make people run away. So I love that story that you sold out in 5 minutes, because it just goes to show the power of vulnerability.
Yeah,
And then when it
absolutely.
comes to posture, it was funny because I was like, right, I need to sit up there. You're making me want to do that. But for me, I've been doing yoga pretty much since I stopped drinking. So the past 4 and a bit years, I do yoga pretty much every day. And a little goes a long way is what I hear all the time.
Yeah.
And before stopping drinking, I remember thinking my posture wasn't that great, or I was a bit hunched over and I needed to have a better posture. And that was a conscious thought that I
Mm,
had. But just by, as you say, that relentless daily action, me standing in mountain pose or just
yeah,
standing up straight and doing that, it does make such a difference.
it
And even
does.
though I might only do 10 minutes a day, I sometimes do an hour of yoga, but I might literally just fit in 10 minutes because of the way the day goes.
Yeah.
But just doing that every day, I know that I'm able, from a self-love perspective, self-care, it does me the world of good. And
Yeah.
so I think it's that repetition, isn't it,
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. That for me, that was the key, was the repetition bit of it, because it's like generating a habit, isn't it? And I'm sure for you, yoga became a habit, and now you
Yeah.
love doing it, and which is why you do it every day. And
Mm.
for me, understanding that habits become full habits when they start to train your brain networks until they're wired in
Mm.
enough that it becomes a default behavior. And I
Yeah.
knew then that I have to make a better posture, not just
Mm.
in general, but when I'm in particular situations, I have to
Yeah.
make that my default behavior. through training, and that's why I was so relentless about it. So every day it was multiple corrections a day, even if I was standing in queue at a coffee shop, because I
Yeah.
write most of my books in coffee shops nowadays, and even if I was standing in a queue, I would adjust my posture rather than getting on my phone,
Yeah.
because when you pick up your phone, what do? You do that. And you look down
True.
and you're
Yeah, of
slouching like that,
course.
and your shoulders come in, and I say, no, shoulders back. And I put my hands in my pockets to push my shoulders back. And I'd breathe and I'd focus on my breathing for the minute or two it took for the cue to go in. And I thought, what a great way to spend, or 5 minutes sometimes, what a great 5 minutes of meditation. Rather than doom scrolling, I'm actually standing upright, consciously adjusting my posture in a way that I know is feeding into my neural networks and making me feel better and stronger. Now, what a great contrasting way to spend 5 minutes while standing in queue at a coffee shop, doom scrolling or building my future through adjusting how I feel on the inside. It's a no-brainer, really.
Yeah. And that's so great because you called that meditation. And so a lot of people think meditation is I need to sit silently somewhere in a dark room, and that's what meditation is, and they don't want to do it. But what you've just described is perfect meditation. That is meditation.
Yeah.
But in terms of some of the tools that you learned, we touched on meditation, breath work, visualization. I know you talk about crystals and Reiki and other things. Maybe you can give a bit of a view in terms of what could be helpful for the listener to start exploring if they haven't gone down this route, and how that links to the science. Plus, you talked a lot about the placebo effect and the fact that people are taking these tablets and there's nothing in them, but they are getting better. So I'd love to maybe go into a bit more detail about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, when a person takes a placebo that they believe is a real drug, one of the most amazing pieces, I think, scientific developments was understanding what happens. So let's say I take a painkiller, for example, or I think it's a painkiller, but it's really a placebo. I expect to feel better. I expect, whether it's a headache or hip pain or something else,
Mm,
I have an expectation that the pain will go away or it will reduce. Expectation as a mindset actually fiddles around with your brain circuits. Expectation causes physical effects in the brain, where your brain now does what it needs to do to meet that expectation. So my expectation is a reduction in pain. So how does
mm,
my brain meet that expectation? Well, the brain has its own natural painkillers. So my brain squirts into different circuits depending upon where the pain is in my body. If I'm aware of a pain in my hip, then my brain will squirt its own natural painkillers into the region associated with my hip. If I have pain in my left knee, then my brain will produce
mm,
natural painkillers and squirt it into the region associated with my left knee. And when scientists figured that out, I thought it was absolutely amazing. And it shows here you have a mental state that's having a very powerful and dramatic effect on the brain, but then also on the body. And while we're on the brain,
mm,
this is an interesting thing about meditation, because your brain isn't this permanent static lump of tissue that stays the same your whole life. Your brain is more like dough when you're kneading the dough before you put it in the oven, and the brain is constantly changing. It's like it's called neuroplasticity. It's constantly changing as you learn new
mm,
things, and as you process events and circumstances of your life, as you create new habits, as you do new things and think in new ways. When a person practices meditation or yoga, for example, so let's suppose in yoga or meditation, you're focusing on your breath. Now, what happens now is you're actually
mm,
exercising this frontal portion of your brain above your eyes, known as the prefrontal cortex. And when I say exercise, you really are. It's like going to the gym. These brain circuits are getting a workout. Just like when you go to the gym and you work out a muscle, the muscle becomes firmer and stronger. The exact same thing happens to your brain networks. They become firmer and stronger and more developed. So this muscle here behind your eyes becomes more powerful. And that's why meditation is associated with better self-control,
mm,
better ability to manage your state relative to how you were before, because the muscle is more powerful. Where I love where this goes is something I've written a lot about recently. Instead of doing, say, mindfulness, you do kindfulness. In other words, part of your focus during
mm,
your practice is thinking kindly. whether it's recalling an experience of kindness or even
Mm.
thinking kindly about someone. Oh, I love that person, a loved one or a friend. Oh, she's such a good person. What an amazing thing she did. And what happens now is you work out this frontal part, but with a slight bias to the left-hand side. And this begins to grow like a muscle. And that's a region associated with happiness and joy and positive mood states. And that's why being
Mm.
kind to people and even thinking kindly about people is associated with improvements in happiness and joy, because you're actually physically shaping your brain networks by simply pointing your mind in that direction. It doesn't even have to be in a meditation. It can literally simply be choosing to be kind on purpose, choosing to see the best in people. It can be celebrating people's victories. You know, I'm so happy for you that such and such a thing happened. Any way of conjuring a feeling of kindness shapes these brain networks until
Mm.
it makes happiness and joy, therefore, more accessible, because you've literally caused a physical change in brain networks.
Yeah, it's amazing because these all feel like simple things to do, but they're not easy, are they? They're,
It
they're
can be
always,
challenging.
yeah, exactly. I'd love to hear about, I know you held your kindfulness experiment in November. Maybe you can talk a bit about that and some of the things people could, you've obviously mentioned a few things people can do, just thinking about kind thoughts about people and the people you love, etc. But tell us a bit about that kindfulness experiment.
Yeah, so I designed a 21-day kindfulness experiment, and the goal was to get people to focus on different aspects of kindness every day for 21 days. And partly how I did that was get them to listen to a kindfulness meditation practice. I call it kindfulness. Any mindfulness-based practice where at least some part, which could be yoga as well, where at least some part of
Mm.
your attention is focused in the direction of kindness. Even if it's just a small part of it, as
Mm.
long as some part of it. So every day for 21 days, people listen to a different kindfulness meditation practice that I'd recorded. And I accompanied each day, each meditation practice with a short video of about a couple of minutes long, where I just educated a little bit about different ways that kindness impacts us, like how it impacts mental health. Another day, how kindness can impact your blood pressure. Another day, the importance of gratitude and different aspects. And each day, I just asked people to either notice something or contemplate something. Interestingly, on purpose, I
Mm.
didn't once ask anyone to go out and be kind, because my theory, my belief was that if people just think about it, people will be kind anyway in how they speak and how they treat people. I knew that would happen, so I didn't need to tell people. I thought I'm just going to see what happens if I just talk about it, get people to think about it. And then what we got is loads of people giving and receiving kindness through the 21 days. And we measured happiness, overall well-being and connection with others, and there was a massive increase in happiness, well-being, connection with others between the beginning and at the end of the 21 days, simply from doing the practice. And the reason I chose 21 days is that is a good enough time to start to see some impact physically on brain circuits.
Yeah, I have my 21-day alcohol-free challenge, and it's the same thing. And for me, I chose to stop drinking for 21 days. I just said, right, I've had enough. I'm going to have a 21-day break with the full intention of going back to
Yeah,
drinking. There was no reason for me to stop. I just wasn't enjoying it anymore, and it was probably not serving me. And so I did these 21 days, and it's like 4 and a bit years later, and I've carried on. And so you're absolutely right. 21 days can fundamentally change your life, can't it?
yeah,
And so what were
absolutely.
some of the outcomes of the people that did that challenge?
In general, people just feeling happier, like, and
Mm.
much more connected to others. Like one of the things that happens is people start to notice, really notice the people in their lives, and
Mm.
notice the nice aspects of the people in their lives that you're aware of, but you're not really thinking about it. So it caused people to notice things more. And people just had more, not only were people giving kindness, but they were starting to realize it was having a ripple effect. And they were noticing that the people that they were helping other people. And very often it was coming back to themselves. They were feeling better in the
Yeah.
moment, but also receiving wee acts of support and assistance as a side effect, not trying to, but people were just doing for them what they'd done for others. kind of thing. And so there was a lot of realizations that I think we've all had the personal experience of in our lives, but it's not enough of a habit for us to actually consciously do it and then notice these things. And so what I wanted to create was the habit of people noticing and having these experiences. And that's why I measured these three things, because I suspected anyway there would be gains in all of these areas.
Mm, mm. And it's true. I think we can be just going about our day to day on a bit of a treadmill and not really taking in little things and
Yeah,
noticing the people around us, as you say. And so just being kind and
yeah,
keep thinking kind thoughts. And it wasn't even being kind, it was, as you say, it was just thinking those kind thoughts, thinking about the kind, and then you end up being kind anyway and
as a side
receiving that
effect. Yeah,
kindness.
yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And so, would you like to touch on your latest book? Should we go there and you can tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So it's the most interesting title I've ever had for a book.
Yes.
It, it, it's called The Joy of Actually Giving, an FUCK. Although we've put a wee smiley face instead of the letter U, because it's to show that the whole thing's positive. And what I'm
Yeah.
meaning about is what happens if you actually care about each other? What happens if
Mm,
you actually help each other? What happens if you actually make an effort to look out for people, to support people, to encourage people? Not big things, but the
mm,
little things. What happens if you actually do
mm,
that? And so, out the book, I explored all the different things that happen, from the
mm,
impact on your mental health, from the impact on blood
mm,
pressure, the physical impact on the shape of blood vessels, the immune system, right down to the genetic level. I explored the different ways that that impacts your life, and also how to be kind in business, how to be a kind leader. If you're in a leadership position
mm,
at work, how do you lead with kindness? What does a kind organization look like? And I explored all different dimensions and gave people practical steps of this is how you might go about doing these. This is some of the things to bear in mind and think about. And I also talked
mm,
about kindfulness, and I contrasted kindfulness with mindfulness, and just pointed out that mindfulness, in the form that we know of it, mostly in the Western world, is an extract from the original context. The original context of mindfulness was that it was embedded within a set of teachings that helped the practitioner to become a more mindfully kind and responsible human being. So in
mm,
Buddhism, it was the Eightfold
mm,
Path, which guided people to think responsibly and kindly, and to communicate responsibly and kindly, to treat people responsibly and kindly. And mindfulness as a seated practice was just one part of that, but it was supposed to be taught within that context, because that context
mm,
orients your moral compass. So when you practice mindfulness
mm,
and you become a better person, you naturally angle your improvements in the direction of helping people and making the world a better place. And ultimately, that's the whole
mm,
point: is we live on this planet together, whether we like it or not. So let's help each other out, kind of thing. And some Buddhist scholars were concerned that might there be a downside then that mindfulness was extracted out of that context, not for ill intentions, only because had you brought all the spiritual and metaphysical, all that kind of stuff, it wouldn't have been accepted in the West. It was originally
mm,
trialled out as a technique to help chronic pain patients in a hospital in Boston in
mm,
1979, and it just caught on so quickly and it became huge because it was such a helpful technique for people. And I love mindfulness, I do it every day.
mm,
So it's such a
mm,
helpful, this isn't knocking mindfulness, but Buddhist scholars were concerned that out of its original context might some people become less kind. And actually, that's true. A lot of research has now shown
mm,
that people who are narcissistic, for example, or people who are low in empathy, even when they practice
mm,
mindfulness and similar techniques, actually become less kind as a consequence. They become more self absorbed. Because what mindfulness does is it stretches you in the direction of who you already are. It's like stretching a muscle. So
mm,
mindfulness stretches you on the inside in the direction of your existing personality. So kind people
mm,
become kinder. People who are more self focused become more self focused. Without the orientation of the context, its original context was embedded within teachings around being more mindfully kind and responsible.
mm,
So without that context, you just go in the direction of who you already are. But bring the context
mm,
back in, which is what I explained as kindfulness. Just bring a bit of context, and what it does, it orients your moral compass so that you then naturally find yourself using the skills you've developed through mindfulness to become more responsible and helpful and kind. And so all I was suggesting in the start, the first couple of chapters of the book, was citing that research and saying, what if we just angle mindfulness with by injecting a little bit more kindness in the context, not necessarily in the technique, but in the context, and then
Mm.
everyone becomes kinder as a consequence.
Mm. Yeah, so interesting. And people who will read that book will probably think, I can be kind and I want to be kind, versus this is an afterthought. Because sometimes people think being kind to people, strangers especially, why do they need to bother? I'm never going to see them again or whatever. And having it as a default, if more people can do that, the world would be such a better place, in
Yeah.
my view.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Because even what's the point of being kind to strangers? Well, you're adding something to their day and their life. And so you're adding
Mm.
something sweet, something beautiful to the world. And it also impacts
Mm.
you. Because the act of
Yeah.
doing that, believe it or not, actually physically impacts your heart, physically
Yes.
impacts your brain networks, physically impacts your immune system. If you can't do it for someone else, at least be aware that you're going to benefit your own health. And it's because we have kind genes. We're supposed to
Mm.
be kind. It's what some of the
Mm.
oldest genes in the human genome, at least 100 million years old. We're
Mm.
nature ensured that the experience of helping others was a pleasurable one and that also benefited us. And that's why our species has lasted this long, because we've learned to care and look out for each other and support
Mm.
each other. So we're supposed to
Mm.
be kind. And so the feedback you get to your emotional state, your brain circuits, your heart, your immune system, and even a slowing of the aging process is like nature's reward. It's like nature saying, yeah, keep doing this, please. This is how we're supposed to be.
Mm.
Kind is what makes us most human.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. Kind is what makes us most humans. So, yeah, let's all be kind today. And it's not difficult,
It's
really,
not.
is it? It's not difficult to be kind, and it's not even something we really should be conscious of. We should just be kind. It's a
With
shame that
grace.
it doesn't feel like that's the case.
Yeah. And one of the
Mm.
simplest ways is captured by my new favorite word. The word is called confelicity. And confelicity means shared happiness. It means to take pleasure
Mm.
in the good fortune of other people. So this doesn't even require you to
Mm.
physically help someone in some way. You just have to be happy for people. I mean,
Mm.
that's easier to do. God, I'm
Yeah.
so happy that you had a good day. Oh, I'm so happy that you got that promotion at work. Oh, I'm so happy that person paid you a compliment. Oh, my goodness, I'm so happy that you had that nice walk at lunchtime. I'm so happy you had a good meal. I'm so happy for you that you had a nice time with friends the other night there. Just being
Mm.
happy for people.
Mm.
And that's what
Mm.
confelicity means. It comes from the Latin for shared happiness. And being
Mm.
happy for other people, you become
Mm.
happier as a side effect. It's one of the
Mm.
simplest ways to improve your happiness is actually
Yeah.
be happy. Be happy for other people's happiness and success, even if at first it feels difficult. I was chatting to a friend recently who was struggling formerly in her life because a relationship had ended and she so wanted to be a mother and was beginning to
Mm.
realize that might never happen and the relationship had ended. And at the time, all her friends were having children. And she
Mm.
realized the envy she felt was tearing her up inside. And she said, I can't do this. She decided to wholeheartedly put heart and soul into being happy for them and being an
Mm.
important part of their life. And very quickly she realized she was genuinely so happy for her. And that was the antidote to the pain and the envy and the hurt that she
Mm.
was feeling herself, was
Mm.
choosing to be happy for other people. And it's one of the
Mm.
easiest, simple, it's not necessarily the easiest, but it's one of the simplest ways to practice
Yeah.
kindness because you can do it from your
Mm.
seat, from your house.
Mm. Yeah, and that made me think about what you mentioned earlier in terms of kind leaders and kindness in the workplace, because I think when you think about the politics that can go on in some of these offices, and then when people get promoted and other people don't, and there's that whole not wanting to be have that shared happiness. I'd
Mm.
love to touch a bit on kindness in the workplace and kind leaders and your perspective on that.
Yeah, so to be a kind leader, it doesn't mean to go easy on things. It doesn't mean to avoid tough decisions. It doesn't mean, even though the term kindness and leadership, you assume you have to be overly lenient. It doesn't actually mean that. What it actually means is that your approach to leadership is based on empathy and compassion and a genuine concern for the needs, the feelings, the opinions, and the well-being of other people. How you then act or react in any given situation will vary from place to place, from context to context. But as long as that's your foundation, empathy and compassion, and a genuine concern for the feelings, the needs, the opinions, and the well-being of each person, then you're always starting from the right place. And it's a journey, it's a learning experience, because we might not get it right all the time. But that's partly what self-kindness is not beating ourselves up for not getting it right all the time. But if we then lead from that perspective, then that becomes a barometer. That's a little background way of saying, wait a minute, how could I be kind here? Given this decision I've got to make, or the way I'm supposed to do this project, is there a way that I can do this with a little bit more kindness than I might ordinarily do? You know, how could I bring kindness to this situation? What might that look like if I was to do it? And sometimes even just brainstorm for yourself, given this exact context. How might I do it? It might be, you know, that person got promoted over me. I feel gutted at that because I really wanted that promotion. But you know what? Holding on to that feeling and then resenting someone and maybe acting in that way, that isn't doing anyone any good. What if I just choose to be happy for the person? Because maybe in their life, maybe they've got a family and they're looking after, that's going to be a good thing in their life. Although how difficult it might be, I am choosing to be happy for you. And you'll find from that state that you generate, that psychological state, better things are more likely to happen because people feel lighter in your presence. You become lighter and more pleasurable to be around when you are happy for other people. People feel that from you and they'll want to hang out with you. They'll probably want to promote you because I think that person's good to be around and I want she or he to be around other people. So the idea that actually wanting people to be happy and successful by default actually makes you more likely to be happy and successful yourself. In part because you're more enjoyable to be around. People feel safer around you and lighter around you. People are more likely to then thrive and be better at what they do because they don't feel threatened and because they feel safer around you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said in terms of it's a choice. We can choose to do one or the other, can't we? We could choose to be bitter and miserable. And as you say, then that's then reflected and people can pick up on that. People, your energy, it's amazing how much your energy people pick up on. And you don't even need to say anything or do anything. But it's a choice to be happy for people as well and to actually show that compassion and empathy and to genuinely, I think it was that genuine word that you used is really important because if you force it or you pretend to be, again, it doesn't come off in the right ways. And then that leads to the betterness because people do want to be around you, do want to be in your energy and in your presence because you're genuinely showing that. But ultimately, it's a choice. We can choose to not do it and see what happens, or we can choose to do it and experiment. And so I love the fact that you called it the kindfulness experiment because it is all about just exploring and seeing what happens.
Yeah, see what happens. Yeah.
Well, this has been enlightening. Thank you so much. I know you drink a little bit, but I always ask this question, so I'm going to ask it anyway. What does thriving alcohol-free mean to you, David?
For me, I would say it's probably just not having alcohol as a dependency. So where I can have a few beers with some friends or have a wee glass of wine with dinner and stuff. Just not having a dependency. And in the same way that I do other things in my life that I don't have a dependency for them, but I enjoy doing them. But probably just the lack of dependency.
That was perfect. Thank you so much. Well, how can people get in touch with you? How can people get your books, etc.?
Well, my website is drdavidhamilton.com. So that has all my books listed. It has my blogs. I write blogs every week. And also I'm on social media, quite active on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, Threads, you name it. Most of the main ones. I post a lot of videos on kindness, the mind-body connection and stuff like that. So I pretty much just create loads of stuff, most of which is free. I have online courses that I run as well, but they're all through my website. So you can find everything that I do on my website.
Brilliant. And it sounds like you're on all the platforms, which is amazing. So, yeah, people should go and check that out. Well, thank you for being the most wonderful guest. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Being kind, thinking kind thoughts, and posture. Posture is a big thing. So hopefully that's that's a takeaway for everyone. And look forward to seeing how your book goes and seeing what you do next. And thank you for the prolific writing and for helping people just understand what can be quite a complex subject in so many ways, just helping people understand it in a really easy way. So thank you for that.
Well, thanks for your kind and very supportive words. I'm really grateful. It's been a real pleasure being on here. So thanks very much again for that.
Well, I'll speak to you soon. Take care.
And you too. Take care.
Well, thank you, David. What an amazing conversation. And I loved the conversation about self-love. As I said at the start in the intro to this podcast, it is so important. And the whole mind, body, spirit connection as well. And just kindness. Kindness is so key. So I do hope you go and check out one of his amazing books, so many, and of course his latest book as well. I hope that that was a helpful episode for you. I will speak to you soon and have the most wonderful week. Take care. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you get alerted every time I drop a new episode. I'd love it if you could rate, review, and share this episode. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at Thrive Alcohol Free and follow me for daily tips. If you would like to work with me, I offer one-to-one coaching sessions and group coaching. If you're not yet ready for coaching, I also have a self-paced online course, which is a companion to my book, A Cocktail of Clarity. All the links are in the show notes. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful week. Take care.